Well, we are really excited today to have Amy Troyer with us. Amy is the Special Needs Ministry Director at the Chapel Green. She is the author of the book, It's More Ups Than Downs, which we'll tell you a little bit more about later, and is a great book for families. And she leads a very innovative ministry at her church for adults with developmental disabilities called Anchored. So we are so excited to talk to her today. Amy, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here to talk with you.
Yeah, well, can you tell us a little bit about your family and why you felt it was important for adults with developmental disabilities to have a place to belong at church too?
Absolutely. So I've been married to my husband now for 29 years. We have two kiddos. Our daughter is 25 and our son is 22, who was born with Down syndrome. We did not find out that he would have Down syndrome until he was born, and then 8 days later that he would need open heart surgery at 3 months. All of that was unexpected, not on our radar. We, picked up, carried on, went through life, started coming back to the church that I had grown up in. We got married in. At about probably 3 to 4 years old, I was told that Ryan did not fit into the kids' ministry here and there was nothing for him. So we could have easily just walked away and said, that's it, be done with it. But God had other plans. Yeah. And not only did we stay at the church and we changed it, but now I am full-time in disability ministry at this church.
Wow.
So running all kinds of programming. So the Lord's got great plans and I just get to be a part of it.
Yeah. I want to stop here for just 1 second, because a lot of times we talk to parents who've had similar stories to you where their child didn't fit into the typical programming and they were told maybe this isn't a fit. Typically, we see these families leave and go to another church, but you actually not only stayed, but actually got the church to change its perspective.
Right.
How did that happen? Like, what was the first step into just deciding this is what we're going to do?
Honestly, it has to be God. I don't know any other way. I mean, it started out slow. They brought me on very, very part-time and we did a respite event, and it just continued to grow through relationships that I had outside of the church with families. And they just saw the benefit of it. I mean, you had asked earlier, like, why do people deserve a seat at the table? Well, in the Bible, it talks about the body of Christ and that there's many, many parts of it and that God places each part where he wants them. So if the body's not complete in the church, then we're failing. And it talks about that, in verse 22, 1 Corinthians 12:22, that the parts of the body that seem weaker are indispensable. So our special needs community, our friends, our children, they're actually indispensable.
Yeah.
So they're missing out on such a great blessing and learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you were obedient to stay there, because I think it would be really easy to just say, this is too hard, or, but what a blessing that your family has brought to your church and this whole community, and now everyone watching today. So you went into the special needs ministry at your church, and over the years, as your son grew, you probably noticed there was probably more things maybe when he was younger, and then once he became an adult, what happened?
Well, we just kept creating classes, for his age group. I mean, even the respite events, people say, well, what's your age? Like, I don't know. Ryan keeps getting older. We have to keep making it respite get older. I don't know what else to do. Yeah. But I started to see, like, the high school and the middle school, the youth groups that they were having and the things that they were doing. And he didn't fit into that per se. I had tried to take him into the high school at one point and he kind of melted into the wall and he's like, I go to the other class. It just wasn't for him. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to, I got to attend a Young Life Capernaum youth group after being asked 3 or 4 times. I was like, okay, we got to go. Uh-huh. But it blew me away. And instantly I went up and said, what do I need to do? How do I get this down to our church and our community? Mm-hmm. And we've been running Young Life Capernaum now for 5 years at the church. But last year, they go to 14 to 22. And at 22, we were seeing some of our kids getting ready to age out. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't ask them to stop coming to something that was giving them such benefits. Mm-hmm. So we opened what we call Anchored here at the church. We run at the same time as Capernaum. It's the same format. but it's giving them all the things that we need as to be in small group. I mean, so it's 22 and older, and our mission is to create spaces of belonging for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities while helping them grow in their faith and knowledge in Jesus.
Yeah.
All the way making friends and creating a community for parents as well.
You said a couple of really important things here. So one thing that we talk about a lot in the disability ministry community is it ever okay to have a separate environment for students with disabilities? Because we talk a lot about inclusion, where we want everyone to be in the general classroom with adaptions. Why do you think it's important that churches can have options, especially as children become teens and adults?
Yeah, inclusion is really talked about a lot, and I see it, but I also see the need to have their own community and being among their own people where they can blossom and grow. Instead of, I had one parent say, my son goes to the ministry, the youth group ministry of the church, but he's not a part of it. Mm-hmm. Well, to create a separate class for them, they get to be a part of something. Mm-hmm. So on Sunday mornings, we have a teen and adult class that's specifically for our friends in the special needs community, and to see them come together as a whole, praying for one another, hugging one another. They're not being shy. They're not quiet, sitting in a corner. They're not being ignored. Mm-hmm. There's just a fine line between inclusion and giving them what they need and probably they may want as well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to look and say, is it what we want them to have, or is it what's best for them?
Yeah. So churches that are watching this, I think what you're saying is it's a both and. So there will be people who they do want to be inclusion in your general youth group, and you want to work with those students and families to make adaptions and do what is necessary. But then there's going to be other people who say, hey, my child really is thriving when he is in with his peers and it is tailored to them. And so I just think this is a really important point as churches become more disability friendly, which is what we want. Right. Is that it's really about not one size fits all, but about options and about inviting the people in your congregation in and asking them, what do you want? How can we partner together?
Exactly. And I mean, we have some kiddos with special needs in the typical, I don't like the typical, but mm-hmm. with the high school and middle school, and they do great. But then there's that group of kiddos that or adults, mm-hmm. it's not going to fit well.
Yeah. And then the other thing is you mentioned that Anchored, which is for adults, was kind of modeled after Young Life Capernaum. Can you explain to our viewers what Young Life Capernaum is?
So Young Life Capernaum is a branch off of Young Life, mm-hmm. and it's a special needs youth group for them. It's Young Life volunteers that come, and they start out with a dance party, and they play some games, and then they bring them in and they teach them a lesson, and they break into small groups and talk about it. And then they go back to a little dance party, and it's over. It's an hour and a half, but these kids, my goodness, to see them wrap their arms around one another and sway back and forth as they're singing worship music and answering the questions about what they've learned. I mean, I'm just honored to be able to stand in the back and watch how this works. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I saw these college kids come in a semester for Capernaum very frightened because they have no special needs background whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And at the end, they were in love with these kids. Mm-hmm. So it's a beautiful thing. So we mimic that exactly. Dance party, a lesson, a couple of games, things on their level, because we're not college age kids. So we're not jumping around and doing flip flops.
Yeah.
a little less exciting maybe, but the same concept. And because it's our church running it, we're getting our volunteers to come in and help with it.
So when you have your Anchored group, which is for 22 and older, can kind of walk us through what that looks like? Is it on a Sunday? Is it during the week? What is the main goals?
I mean, you could do it anytime you want to do it. We coincide with Capernaum, so we do it on Saturdays from 4 to 5:30. That way we don't need to feed them or our volunteers. It's not taking your morning or your evening. It's not a big commitment, but it's giving them what they really need, what they deserve.
So one big part of Anchored is it gives the students community together, but it also pours into their faith. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, to see them grow in their faith, my goodness, it trickles down.
Yeah.
So I have seen recently one of the gals that comes to our Sunday morning. She came to Capernaum. She's a part of Anchored now. I just got to baptize her 2 weeks ago.
My goodness.
I've never baptized anybody. I was scared than her, but to see her grow in her faith and to have like the others peers see her and now they want to be baptized. So I just see them understanding it and growing to love Jesus so much more. I hear them say, we want to read our Bibles, or they show me the verses that they were reading for the week. It's giving them an opportunity to know more about Jesus, which is what we want.
Yeah. So how do you instill that faith in them? What type of things do you do while they're there?
At Anchored? So we use the Honeyword Bible, and it has some fabulous tools in it to teach with. So it's very concrete for them. So, Jesus is the bread that keeps me fed. Like, we bring out the bread and we explain who Jesus is and why he's the bread of life. And then we let them see, they hold up a piece of bread. So every time they would see bread, they'll think about that verse.
Yeah, I love that.
And it goes, there's so many to use, but it's such a great way to help them grow in their faith and give them what they need to function throughout the day in the world. They can rely back on what they're learning.
So do you have a curriculum that you guys use, or are you guys kind of putting the lessons together yourself?
Putting lessons together ourselves.
And how do you, if a church is watching and they're thinking, this sounds great, we would like to do this, how could they approach it, do you think?
They can call me and I'll give them everything I've ever put together.
Good. That's the correct answer. Okay, good. But
yeah, it's all about sharing. So we've only run Anchored for a year, so we've got 4 or 5, and it only runs during the school year. We take the summer off. But what I have, I'll gladly share with anybody that's interested, and I'll do a Zoom. I'll talk to you. I'll help you in any way I possibly can.
So tell us a little bit about the people who volunteer there. What has the impact been on them and on your church as a whole?
Wow. So our volunteers, I know everybody thinks they've got great volunteers, but I really, really think the special needs team is like by far the best. They have just grown to love these students, teens, adults more than I ever thought. And again, they're coming in with no real background in it, but they're there every single Sunday or every month that we're running Anchored, and they're jumping in and they're loving on the kids and students. And to see them, actually a group of the volunteers that are here on Sunday that actually serve at Anchored as well created their own Bible study. Wow. So we're meeting on Mondays as well. So to see that come to fruition, or the texting back and forth, the moms of these individuals. So I created a Zoom Bible study for moms of special needs because we can't get out as often as others. So there's 10 to 12, and not all of them can jump on a Wednesday, but my goodness, the text messages that are going back and forth on a day-to-day basis of, I'm so celebrating this, I need prayer for this. I have to turn it off because my phone's blowing up. But there's a community, and it's because of their children and because of what they're able to offer. So we're not ministering to just that group of individuals. We are ministering to the entire family.
It kind of sounds like you are ministering to the entire church to me.
Yes, that's
it. Because the moms having that connection. Can you explain, as a mother of a child with a disability, what it means to not feel alone?
It's huge. I remember when Ryan was born, at that point it was like 1 in 800 with Down syndrome. And I remember walking into malls or fairs and almost breaking down and weeping. I'm like, I know there's 800 people here. Where are we at? Where are people like us? and it hurt. And to come into church and see, well, be told that there's nothing here and he doesn't fit in, which just hurts a mom's heart to no end. I'm sure dad's too, but to feel so isolated and alone. And you can't get to church all the time, or you can't get to a Bible study every week and sit at a table for 2 hours, or the other things that other families get to do. Even conferences they come to, it doesn't always pertain to us. So it's lonely. So when you find your tribe, it feels like family.
I just think this is so important. I just hope that everyone really thinks about this and hears it, because when you find your tribe, and especially when it's at church, in a place where faith is going to be poured into that tribe, that is life-changing. It is life-changing for everyone in that family, because a parent who feels supported versus one who feels alone parents differently. They have different energy levels. I mean, it has just like a effect, a ripple effect. And then see what you're doing in the church with the volunteers, because I have to believe that the volunteers are growing in their faith and in their compassion, and that is rippling out into our community and the church community.
We have a one volunteer, her son has autism, and he was in our class for probably a year and a half. And now he's with his peers in high school. But she serves because she's like, what you did for my child, I want to do for another family, so that they know that they're welcome, accepted, and loved. So to see that is just amazing to come to fruition. What
has Anchored meant for Ryan?
You know what? He has something to look forward to. When he was little, whenever we would do a respite, he'd call it a church party. We're going to a church party. It's kind of the same thing. And I was talking to a mom last week, and she's like, I know, we need to get into church. He doesn't have people coming around him and wrapping around him. And I said, well, if we didn't attend church and have that family, Brian wouldn't have that either. I mean, we would be isolated. But he has people coming around him, and people know him. He's known and loved. So it's huge because of the isolation. I mean, these families sit at home and there's not a lot to do with your kiddos. But here is an opportunity for them to come and make friends and to see the blessings, to be together, to learn about Jesus. Oh my goodness. Like, my son will not eat his food until you say prayers. Even if we're out and we're talking to somebody, he sits there patiently because he wants to pray before he eats. It's just things like that they learn, and it's in their heart.
I want to speak to that for just a second, because I think there are people out there who maybe aren't as familiar with disability or haven't had a loved one with a disability, who may think maybe it's not as critical for a person who may have intensive needs to be taught the gospel as someone else, because some people think, well, they're just going to go to heaven or whatever. Why does it matter? Why is it important for every person to be poured into in a way they can absorb it?
Because we were meant to be community. We were meant to be in God's presence. We were meant to be together. For them to be able to come, and I see Christ in all of them in such a special way. So why shouldn't they be able to come someplace and worship him, to share, to show it? We have families that stay home still since COVID to watch church online, and they say, well, we're watching, but there's something different about being here and being in the worship center and everybody singing together. I mean, it's a moving experience, and you're praising the Lord. So to see these individuals be able to come and be together and worship and learn and understand, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I just want to also put in there for people, if you're not familiar, sometimes you might see someone who is nonverbal or doesn't demonstratively show their worship. That does not mean they are not learning and understanding and getting that peace of Jesus in their heart inside. And so no matter what you think you know or you see, I think God wants us to just keep making ways to pour in to everyone where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. My son's speaking skills are not strong at all,
Mhm.
but he knows the Lord and he loves the Lord, and he'll tell you that he lives in his heart.
Mhm.
Um, he's even shown recently when we talked about baptism that he wants to be baptized. So they get it,
Yeah,
whether or not they express it, they
right.
get it.
Yeah, yeah, that is beautiful. So tell us a little bit about your book. It's more ups than downs.
So that came out of Brian's birth. Like I said, we didn't know that he was going to be born with Down syndrome, and I had to have a C-section. And laying on the table, they came to the head of the table and told us that he possibly had this, and then immediately began to tell us everything bad. He may not walk. He may not talk. This will happen. My husband was in the hospital room planning to buy a van that was wheelchair accessible. Just, it was awful. And then they gave us a book with awful pictures.
Mm.
And I left that hospital. And I'm like, I don't want another family to ever go through this. Like, I know I'm still at the beginning stages of this, but I go back to Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope in a future. And there's no parenthesis that says, as long as you have all the right chromosomes, as long as your hands work, as long as your legs work, every single person. So I knew Ryan was here to make a difference in the world. It started with us. I mean, his birth brought our marriage closer, our walk with Jesus closer. My daughter is the most amazing human being because of her brother. Um, so I didn't want another family to go through that. So as he got older, I started meeting families, and I was kind of doing it on my own, telling them how wonderful this was. And I'd get a call to come to the hospital, and it's like Christmas morning going, telling them, like, you have no idea how great this is going to be.
Yeah.
So I started interviewing some of the families that I had worked with. And so of 11 families in our area, I started interviewing them, and I realized we were all saying the same thing, that, oh my goodness, this was so scary. It was so hard, but this is the greatest blessing we've ever been given. And I was like, okay, this is really cool.
Yeah.
So this book was written to get in the hands of families, to doctors' offices, to know that this isn't a death sentence.
Yeah.
It's a life sentence. And you get to see the kingdom upside down the way that it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Now, remind me, Amy, did you tell me that they used this book in missions somewhere?
Yeah. So
Okay. Tell us about
he
that.
has a ministry, and he's not even aware that he has this ministry. Like, this, what's happening in this church is because of his birth. Respite, Jesus prom, anchored, because he was born. So my family has been traveling to Ichmal, Mexico, in the Yucatan, which is a Mayan Indian village, for probably 14 years. And I went twice. I always said I wasn't a missionary. And then one day God said, oh, guess what? You're a missionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I had asked, are there special needs kids in this village? I mean, it's a tiny little, no, there's not any. Well, when I went, we found 5 that had been the little wooden huts, and 2 with Down syndrome. Like, what are the odds? So I got to share with them our life. They all believed, well, if we come back to the States, we can be healed, right? And I got to share, no, like, God made your child exactly the way that he wants them to be, and they're perfect the way they are. We shared about Ryan's life, so I had somebody translate most of the book in Spanish so that we could take it and get it into their hands. So, the next year we did the same thing. I found 5 more in another village. I haven't been back, but my husband goes every year, and everybody wants to know when Ryan's coming. How's he doing? How's our family? Like, this kid has a mission in Mexico that he's not even aware that he started.
Yeah.
And I see him there.
What I love so much about your story, because I like interviewing people and kind of you can see patterns in their life, but yours is something difficult happens and then you say, nope, we're going to get back up, and then God uses that for something amazing. And that is so encouraging to me, and I think everybody watching. If you could leave one thing for parents who are watching this, who maybe they have a child with a disability, or maybe they have a brand new diagnosis, what is one thing you want them to remember?
This is not a death sentence. That it is okay to feel what you're feeling. And because we all did. There's not one of us that didn't have those emotions of, I don't think I can do this. I don't understand anger, sadness. But God's got bigger plans. And there's beauty in the ashes. Not that our children are born at the ashes, but he creates just beautiful things that you wouldn't see without them being a part of your life. Mm-hmm. So you go ahead and mourn, but know that the joy is coming.
Yeah, that's great. And for church leaders watching this, what is something you want them to know? Why, if they're feeling an itch, like maybe we should take a leap of faith and start a Young Life Capernaum or an Anchored program, or maybe they're just thinking like, man, our church has never really stopped to think about disability inclusion and ministering to families affected by disability. Maybe we need to start that conversation. What do you want them to know?
First and foremost, pray about it. Ask God to open doors, but then open the doors and let them in. Know that it's not going to look like any other ministry in your church. You are never going to look like the high school and the middle school youth group. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you get 2, you've succeeded because you're ministering to 2 families and love on them. And it's word of mouth and it's relationship. So each and every one of them is important and it's connected, but open the door, allow them to come in and know that God's got greater plans.
So Amy, was there anything that you wish you would have known before you got started?
Yeah, that God's going to provide, because the amount of stress that I went through thinking this is never going to work. Nobody's ever going to come. I'm never going to be able to get this event off the ground. You know, it's every time I've thought that, God has opened a door and just blown me away. 2 things that come to mind right away is we just did a Jesus Prom in August, and somebody gifted us a limo, about party bus, but they said it's not wheelchair accessible. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just explain that to everybody. So as I was doing the training for our volunteers, and one of them was on Zoom, and I said, we've got a party bus and a gaming bus. The party bus isn't wheelchair accessible, but the gaming truck will be. And I got off of Zoom, and then I got an email from a gal who runs a day cab at another church, and she said, hey, we have a fleet of these party buses that are wheelchair accessible. Do you want to borrow one?
Wow.
Hit me. Just wow. You know, and then right after COVID, when we were starting to be allowed to come back together, I thought, let's do an outdoor movie. And a lot of my ideas just come, I'm like, let's just try it and see if it works.
Yeah.
And I prayed, Lord, just maybe 10, 12. We had over 300 people in our parking lot to watch this movie.
Wow.
So just things like that, you know, Anchored. Let's try this. God just keeps providing. And I mean, me being on full-time staff, God keeps providing.
Yeah.
So I should have known and not stressed out.
Yeah. So if people are thinking, is it worth taking the leap of faith?
100%.
Yeah.
Because God's got this. It's his plan. It's his will.
Yeah. So if people want to get more information about how to start an Anchored at their church, what should they do?
They can reach out to me. My email is amy.troyer@tcig.org. From there, I'll give you my cell phone number. I'll Zoom with you, whatever you need, I will do to help you do this, because it's important for our kids and our teens and young adults to have that community, because God tells us to be in community together. Just do it. You are going to be blessed, and you are going to see things you never thought you'd see. The joy is tremendous.
Well, thank you, Amy, so much for being with us today. We just absolutely love what you're doing, and we are so excited to get people in touch with you so that we can spread what you're doing with adult developmental disability ministry to churches all around. So thanks for being with us today.
I appreciate it.